Okay, buyer contingency addendum. This is one that we are starting to see more and more used more often. Contingencies are interesting. It's broken up into two separate sections based on where you're at as a buyer trying to sell a current home. They're complicated. There's a lot of moving parts to them. We might have to do 2 videos to fully get through this document because there's a lot that goes into contingencies versus and how these work. I've done a bunch of them. I'm very well versed in this document, so we'll go through it and I'll explain it as best I can and succinctly as best I can. But there's a lot that goes into buying and selling at the same time, and what that looks like for you, and how do we make that work. Because most people, if they own a home, their equity for the home or their money that they need for a down payment on another home is tied up in the home that they currently own. So a lot of times we see that buyers have to sell their current home in order to get the money that they need to use as a down payment to purchase their next home. So here's how this works. This actually goes, again, with the purchase contract. There's on page 1, there's a box that's checked that's the contingency addendum. And I'll walk you through it because there's 2 different types of contingencies. So seller's name goes here, buyer's name goes here, premises address goes here. So this all is related to the house that you as a buyer are trying to purchase. So for the seller, when your agent, or like if I'm taking this to you as the listing agent and saying, okay, we have a buyer, we have a very good offer on your home. They're contingent on the sale of their home, or they're contingent on the closing of their home. It's all outlined in this particular document right here. All right. So there's 2 different ways that you can approach this. Section 1 is contingent upon the closing of a buyer's property. So this section is, we've already gotten your house under contract as a buyer. We know the close of escrow date. We know we have all of our numbers in line, right? So we already know how much your house is selling for. We already know, we've already talked to title. They've run a basic net sheet, so we know how much money we're working with down payment wise that you need. Are you getting all of that from the sale of your home, or do you have some of it in a bank account? However that works, we've worked very closely with the lender to ensure that all of our numbers line up. So section 1 is specific to, do you already have your house under contract? So if your house is under contract, then we're using section 1. All right. So it says buyer has accepted an offer to purchase buyer has accepted an offer to purchase buyer's real property located at, so we would put your current home address here. The accepted offer documents described in section 3 are attached here too. So there's documents that I have to attach to our offer to show, yes, we already have a contract on the home. All right. So the buyer's contingency, if the pending sale of the buyer's property does not close by X date. So this is where we would put the actual close, or we would put a close of escrow date here. So typically I usually add a week to whatever the close of escrow date is in the contract in case your buyer isn't able to perform. We have a little bit of wiggle room. So we would put, let's say your close date is May 15th. Then we would say that if the pending sale of buyer's property does not close by May 22nd, so I added 7 days to your close date to ensure that there's a little bit of wiggle room in how we approach our offer that we've written on the current home, or the home that you're trying to purchase. Buyer has 3 days to waive the contingency by written notice to seller in the manner required by the contingency waiver provision, or the contract shall be deemed canceled and the earnest money shall be released to the buyer. So if your house doesn't close for whatever reason, let's say buyer's loan failed to go through, something happened with, or let's say we're in the middle of the inspection period and we can't come to terms on the repairs the buyer wants, then in that case, if that part falls through, or let's say your property doesn't appraise, or wherever we happen to be at in the contract, if your buyer walks on your home that you're trying to sell to purchase another home, I have to notify the agent on the home that you're purchasing. So this is how, and so let's say that the sellers for the home that you're purchasing are not willing to give us an extension to be able to find another buyer, get through inspection period, get through appraisal, get through all of that. And they say we're done. Okay, well then the deal cancels, you get your earnest money back, seller goes to try to find another buyer. Okay, so that's how this works. This means that we already have a buyer. Ideally, typically, if we already have a buyer on your home, then ideally we don't write an offer until we're past inspection period. So I typically, on my listings, when I'm working with sellers, if I know we're in a market and market conditions where we might see contingent offers, typically what's in the best interest of the seller is to not accept an offer until you're past your inspection period. Since there's so much that can happen during those first 10 days of being under contract, after that, everybody's pretty locked in that they're ready to move forward to get the deal done. And as we move through the rest of it with the appraisal and then the loan contingencies and everything, and as we get closer to that close of escrow date, then we would work through those things together. But I try not to, I advise my buyers, if you're selling your home and we're working through the sale of your home, it's really not a good idea to write an offer until we're through the inspection period, just because it makes you look a little bit more attractive. Now, there's less hoops to jump through. It gives the seller some peace of mind that we're far enough along in the process that they're going to be able to close quickly, and that works out great for them. So, section 2, though, this is contingent upon an accepted offer for the buyer's property. So there's a lot that goes into this. So section 2 is super complicated. Let's say you're in a position where you have very specific needs for the home that you want to purchase. And you're not seeing a lot on the market in your price range for what you need. Then more than likely we're going to have to work with this contingent upon accepted offer for your buyers, for your house. This can get very challenging, and a lot of sellers will not accept these terms. I'll just be completely honest with you. There's a lot of risk in asking the seller to accept these terms. Your property is not on the market yet. You're planning on getting it on the market, but it's not on the market yet. So not only does the seller have to wait for you to get your house on the market, but then they have to wait for you to get an offer on your home. And then we have to work through all of those things. So there's provisions in there that favor the seller in these instances, but it's not unheard of. I've had clients have their offer accepted. It's how you write in the dates and how you work through these contingencies. So in this section, you obviously put your current home address here on line 19 or line 20, and then it says right here, so it says the contract is contingent upon buyer accepting an offer to purchase buyer's real property located at X address no later than X date. So let's work with that May 15th example again. So May 15th, let's say that it's April. You've seen a couple homes that will work for your family. Not a lot, but you've seen a couple. And so you're like, okay, well, we can go ahead and put our house on the market, or we can go ahead and work through doing that. And hopefully one of these sellers will accept our offer and give us the appropriate amount of time. So let's say, so it's April, we start seeing homes, you find a couple that you like, I call the listing agent, I explain the situation to them and say, okay, here we go. They want until May 15th to get their property under contract. Is that something that your seller is willing to accept? If I'm the listing agent, my answer is I need to talk to my clients and see. I'm here to help facilitate the deal that works best for you. So I take this back to you as the seller, or as me being the listing agent, listing your home to sell. And I say, okay, here's the situation. These people really love your home. However, they need to get their house on the market. They're giving themselves until May 15th to find a buyer. Will you accept those terms? So then we have to discuss what that means. All right. So if buyer does not accept an offer on buyer's property by the date set forth on line 21, buyer has 3 days to waive this buyer contingency by written notice in the manner required by the contingency waiver provision, and contract periods shall commence. Or this contract shall be deemed canceled and the earnest money shall be released to the buyer. So what this is saying right here is it's beginning of April. We're listing the home. We have until May 15th to get your house under contract. Okay. Let's say May 15th happens and we don't have your house under contract. Then we have two options. Depending on your pre-approval, if the lender says, well, they can go ahead and buy it, they're qualified to purchase the home without the contingency, then we would move forward under those terms. And you would waive the contingency, and we're trying to simultaneously sell your current home while you're trying to buy another home. Well, most of the time that's not a viable scenario for most buyers. So what we have to do is, in this case, let's say May 15th rolls around, we don't have a buyer on the home. All right. So I'm representing the seller on the home that a buyer is trying to buy. They have submitted this. Buyer's agent comes to me and says, I'm really sorry. We don't have a buyer on the home. We tried everything in our power. Sometimes they'll ask for an extension and they'll say, I think we're really close. We've had a lot of interest. We just dropped the price. Here's all the marketing I've done. I take that back to you as the seller. If I'm the buyer's agent and I say, okay, I'm representing the sale and the purchase of a home, I go to the listing agent and I say, okay, here's the situation. These are all the things that we've done. We'd really like a 2-week extension. Will your client give us the 2-week extension? These dates are all negotiated, and we try to figure out what's the best route for both the buyer and the seller if we get to that deadline and we don't have a buyer on the home. Now, if we do have a buyer on the home, then things then we revert into, we're still contingent on the sale of your home because you still need that money, but then we start working through different timelines of the contract. All right. So accepted offer for buyer's property. If a buyer accepts an offer on buyer's property by the date set forth on line 21, buyer shall deliver accepted offer documents described in section 3 to seller for seller's review within 3 days or X number of days if we choose to extend that timeline of execution of the accepted offer. So in this case, with this particular, so once as the buyer's agent, let's say I'm representing you as the buyer, as the buyer's agent, the minute we get your home under contract and we have everything executed, counter offers, all that stuff done, I have to send that over to the listing agent. If I'm the listing agent, as soon as I get those terms or I get the offer, then I have to send it back over, then I have to review it with you as a seller. Seller may, within 3 days of receipt of accepted offer, cancel this contract and earnest money shall be released to the buyer. If buyer accepts an offer on buyer's property and fails to deliver the accepted offer documents to the seller within the time frame set forth on line 26 to 27, seller may cure notice to buyer as required by section 7A of the contract. And in the event of a buyer's breach, seller may be entitled to earnest money pursuant to section B of the purchase contract. So basically that means seller has a chance to review the accepted offer documents. If they choose to cancel the contract, they have to cancel under certain circumstances. I actually had a seller try to cancel on my buyers, and we ended up having to get an attorney involved. And we essentially won that case. It was very complicated. It's complicated language, but just know that the seller, under very, 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 very minute circumstances, they may try to cancel. It's very difficult for them to cancel. It would have to be something egregious in the buyer's offer that would make it so that they would have grounds to cancel. Buyer's contingency. If the seller does not cancel this contract within 3 days of receipt of the accepted offer documents, this contract shall become contingent upon the closing of the pending sale of the buyer's property by X date. So there's a couple dates that we have to, as we're writing this addendum, and we don't have the property under contract. So let's say right here, we're working with this, we want to get the property under contract by May 15th. All right. So typically closings take about 30 days from once we get an offer accepted. So we have to factor in about a 30-day window here, maybe 45 days, just to give a little cushion depending on who the lender is that the current buyer is using, all of those things. So like we could say, if we're looking at May 15th here to get under contract, maybe we're looking at a June 28th, 29th, 30th close.